Roll call, we have two members who are excused, Eric and Rob. I'm looking for a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes. Motion by Mr. Knope. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman. All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. At this point, then, we're going to move into public comments and appearances. Just a reminder to the community, you are welcome to speak to us on any topic that is on the agenda for up to 3 minutes. And if you have something to share with us, you can step to the podium and we'll start the timer. Mr. Sigwart.
John Sigwart, 230 West High Street. I'm here to discuss Whitetail Hills. I thought that the staff made some really good points regarding Whitetail Hills, but I think the point that we missed is conservation easement. I really want this body to seriously consider a conservation easement and maybe even go so far as to talk to the Ozaukee Washington Land Trust to maybe be the steward of the property. A little bit unusual that the city would require conservation easement because they're normally donated by the landowner or sold. But I think it's a really good idea here. The long, skinny lots that go into the wetlands are losers. We tried it at the woods at White Pine, and we have the yards that go 50 feet into the wetlands. Because there wasn't a conservation easement, it was just a wetland line. So I think to give it some teeth, if you really want to have control for the sensitive areas, which you call, what is it called again, Mike? You know, Bob, what do you call it?
Isolated natural resource.
So it's an it's an INRA, okay. I believe that it's worth conserving, and if you want to do that, please do it as a conservation easement. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sigwart. Any other public comments? Any of our scouts want to give a 2 to 3 minute impromptu speech about the 4 ways or your Webelow patches you're working on or anything? You clearly learned in school to minimize your eye contact with me when I'm asking questions, so excellent. All right, our next agenda item then is conditional use review, 5-year review of the Schmidt's Ready Mix conditional use grant from 775 Schmidt Drive. Staff recommendation is to approve the conditional use grant for another 5-year period. Mr. Harris.
Okay. In 1993, there was a conditional use grant given to Schmidt's Ready Mix at that location that you see on the screen. And it was to permit concrete crushing with portable equipment. And at the time of the conditional use approval, there was a stipulation that they should come back for a review every 5 years. And we are at one of the 5-year increment periods. And so it's before the Plan Commission for renewing the conditional use yet for another 5-year period. Much like in the previous review periods, we've received no complaints. There has been no issues, and therefore staff recommends approving the renewal of the conditional use for 5 years.
Any questions for Bob?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Any conversation on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That stands approved. Going to number 5, preliminary plat. Highland Point Subdivision. Hold on a second. Highland Point Subdivision located north of Newport Vista Drive and south of East Sauk Road. The staff recommendation is the preliminary plat complies with section 18.07.20 subsection A of the city subdivision control ordinance relating to preliminary maps. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions of approval. And Bob's going to explain those to us. Mr. Harris.
Okay, we have seen this subdivision in the last couple meetings, both at Plan Commission and at Common Council. This is a proposed 82-unit single-family subdivision south of Sauk Road and north of Newport Vista Drive. And we are now at the preliminary plat approval. The preliminary plat is before you in the packet and up on the screen. The layout is fairly consistent with what the concept plan is, with the connections both to Windrush, Misty Ridge, and to East Sauk Road. There is some outlots, but other than that, it's quite consistent with what we've seen in the past. There is actually, I don't have any conditions of approval. I just just saying, requesting that staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat. If you do have questions, however, I know there's a representative from Newman to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any questions for Bob or the developer?
Did the, we'd received an email on this today with some concerns with local resident. Were these conveyed to the developer as well?
Yes, they would. Yes, they are, and Mr. Lindgren is here.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian Lindgren with Newman Developments. Thanks. Yeah, I did. The questions were passed on just to answer them and try to recollect the answers right now. Question one was about the entrance location, site distances, and so on. Rob, the engineer, brought that up, I think, a meeting or two ago, whether it was Common Council or Plan Commission. We had our surveyor and engineer go out and shoot site distances, and we even upped the distance measurements based on a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit versus 35 that's currently on the road. And the site distances of the proposed location are in excess of the minimums that would be required. So we're not concerned about safety of the location. Some of the other questions were about density and other things like that I don't think, I think were vetted thoroughly on other steps. And then there was a question about preservation of vegetation along Sauk Road that really is going to be dependent on final construction plans. We will have to do some clearing, that's inevitable, to put in the entrance, the XL, decel lanes that go on the shoulders, improve the shoulder as necessary, whatever's vetted through final engineering, sidewalk as required, so be it on Sauk Road. So there will be some impact to that. There just won't be any way to avoid it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns about the motion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Good luck. Preliminary plat review for Whitetail Hills subdivision located north of Terrace Drive and Greshel Road and east of Seven Hills Road by the Northport Group LLC. Get to this page, excuse me. The staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat as shown with the following recommendations. Reconfigure those lots containing slivers, example lot 35. Mr. Harris.
Okay, just reviewing, the commission has seen this previously at the conceptual plan level, and now the development team is here for the preliminary plat. Just a general location up on the screen, it is on the far north side of town, abutting Seven Hills Road. It is north of Terrace Drive and also Greshel Road, just kind of approximately in that red bordered area. And the woods that were referred to earlier at this meeting are shown, you can just see them on the far right hand of the subject site. So speaking of the concept plan, this is the concept plan that was shown a few months ago. You know, the connections are from Terrace and Greshel and into and out of LL. It's notable, it has a number of wetlands and of course the woods on the east. This is the preliminary plat. And then if you see just kind of toggling back and forth, the key change was in the concept plan, we had the what's labeled at the time was Street C, and a cul-de-sac of Street D, kind of abutting into those woods. This was discussed at the concept plan level about preserving those woods or the isolated natural resource area. And so the developers have removed that cul-de-sac, preserving the entirety of the INRA. And then as you can see, the difference is just having those longer, thin lots going into the woods, just essentially dividing up those woodlands between the abutting lots. As I said, the recommendation was to approve. There is just kind of the conditions on the recommendation. I do note the sliver a lot. Generally, I've learned this from Alderman Sigwart, is to try to have the geometrically equal and aligned lots as possible. So the sliver is, see if you can see it in my cursor, this little guy right here. Is in regards to the natural resource area, it's kind of a soft recommendation, to be honest with you. I am recommending the lot layout, generally as speaking. There are two options that I kind of note in my report. The first option is what we kind of saw with the concept plan, essentially preserving that isolated resource area just as an outlot to be owned and maintained by the homeowners association. The second option, of course, is what we see with the preliminary plat and it being divided equally or not equally, but divided amongst the lots. My recommendation was based on the fact that I think the primary concern and the primary intent is to preserve the woods. I think in the preliminary plat, they are preserved, albeit divided ownership. I do think there are mechanisms in place to preserve those woods and not have them just be a function of a private lot to be used for as will. I think there's we can look at deed restrictions and recording these notations of the deed restriction language similar into the final plat, which are recorded. I think that is an option too. And so that's given that is not public lands, it is going to be either as an outlot owned by the subdivision or amongst these lots. Either way, it's not going to be a public land. And secondly, and I'll let the development team speak to this, I think the land itself has a deep step off immediately on that western edge of the isolated resource area, rendering it between that and the wetlands fairly unusable. And so with that, I gave my recommendation to this layout, but either or, there's good points to be made either way. And but this was my recommendation, but I'm happy to let the development team answer any questions you have.
Is it to our advantage as the city to allow them to maintain the way their plat is drawn with the property being owned and assessed and, on the city opposed to any other pieces? As property owners, I guess I'm thinking that those lots, while long and narrow, may be desirable because of what they have behind there and that they can maintain and control it.
This actually came up when discussing it with the project engineer. And so actually, I would think that if they want to answer that question, I know we've kind of touched on that, what the mayor was getting at.
What was your question? I'm sorry. I'm Kevin Parrish from Quam Engineering, where we did the subdivision plat. Oh.
I didn't have a question for you. I had a question for our planner. Is it to the city's advantage to have that property owned opposed to
When you
locked up?
You're
looking at, if I can read this .1 font, these are 1.3, 1.2, 1.5, 2.5 acre lots in the city of Port Washington.
correct. When you say owned, you mean by owned by the city or owned by the?
No, owned by the landowner, because then it's assessed and
It's a higher it's, the lots are.
Those are
given
huge lots
higher
for the city
value,
of
yes,
Port
they
Washington.
are. There's a higher value presumably tied to those lots individually then, yes.
Right. And with a forest that we've never had access to before, what is our advantage as a city to ask that be put in a conservation easement or a park?
That is just buttressing what we have in both sewer pack and our own comprehensive plans about preservation of natural, isolated natural resource areas. And so it's a preservation of a woodlands that's just beneficial overall as an environmental policy.
Sure. And did I hear you correctly say that there can be a deed in there that whole area would have to be maintained?
Yeah, then we can look at that through the developer's agreement about, having deed restrictions assigned to those lots and the language saying that this is an isolated natural resource area to be preserved and not clear-cutted or built into
Or filled?
or filled with the wetlands, correct.
Okay.
As far as if it is platted off as lots, you can still do that as far as it's platted off in lots?
You can. I was, speaking to other colleagues of mine, and yes, it's a similar thing, either as an outlot or as designated as individual lots that, that natural resource is designated on the plat. And
Right.
so whether it's divided up or just an outlot, it's still there.
It's still there.
I have a question for
Yeah,
the,
Tony, Mr. Matura.
so, has that been addressed? Have you guys, has that been mentioned to you guys as an option or possibility or?
Yeah, I
Are you
think
in
that was
favor
our
of-
plan going, I think I can speak for them. That was the plan going in, that we would provide an easement or some deed restriction on those lots so that it wasn't clear cut for that instance. And we even show the building setbacks out of that isolated natural area to prevent building from going into that area. So they just thought it would be better maintained by a property owner and, brush and fallen trees
Sure.
would be taken down and maintained better than an outlot. So,
Thank you.
yep.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
What's the enforcement if we have a violation of the deed restriction? What's the city's position? How do we enforce that?
With enforcement, it's like anything else. There's the fact that there is something called, if there's a deed restriction and there's notation on the final plat, that gives the city its hook to hang its hat on about enforcing it if it comes to fruition or it comes to light that a property owner is filling or clear cutting.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the property? Mr. Knope?
Mr. Harris, if that ends up going,
Thank you.
going to a conservation easement, to Alderman Newmeyer's point, does that then, the holder of that easement, if it is, say, Ozaki Washington Land Trust, say, they then have to maintain it if there is wind blowing trees or anything like that? Is that correct?
I'm a little iffy on conservation easements.
Okay.
If it was a outlot with a overlay, what we have in our zoning code is an overlay plan development for conservation preservation, that would just be maintained by the homeowners
By the
association.
HOA.
Yes.
Okay.
I would imagine if it was, if there was an easement, there would be a language in there about the land trust maintaining it. Then we have a question of access across private property and some
Right.
other issues to be, the details that would need to be worked out in that legal easement document or tool.
Thank you.
I don't know. Whoever gets lot 27, they can put in a full football field, a baseball diamond. Any other questions?
The question is, the motion that is on the floor right now as is to approve with the deed restriction, or just to approve flat out? Or I just want to make sure that we are clear on staff recommendations.
There's no motion at this point, so however that would be made, listen, here, Mr. Harris, your recommendation is to put in there deed restrictions to ensure that one person
That's
just
what-
doesn't clear cut and
Right.
they have grass all the way back and fill and impact the wetlands. That's a significant part of the city's drainage and retention strategy going down to downtown, correct? That area?
Yeah, those wetlands are there for a reason, yeah.
I move to approve.
So the motion is to approve the plat map with a list of deed restrictions to be designed and developed by Mr. Harrison, the city attorney, with the landowner?
Yeah, would be part of the developer's agreement.
Sure. Okay.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other conversations on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? I'm not sure what just happened. Okay,
Not sure either.
approved.
Are we adjourned? What just happened?
You're welcome, thank you. For some reason, we did not harmoniously say aye. Number 7, annexation, consideration and possible action on the proposed Friar Field subdivision located north of Sunset Road and west of Amber Lane in the town of Port Washington. Staff recommendation is to approve. Bob?
Mr. Mayor, I received earlier the request from the applicants to hold this matter as they aren't ready yet, and they would request to be held.
Oh. Well, you can thank.
Move the table.
Yeah, I don't, do we need a motion to table it? Just see no action? No, okay. All right, then let's move to number 8. Send them a card thanking them for reducing the amount of time at the meeting tonight. Number 8, zoning text amendment, consideration and possible action on amending section 20.34.19B of the City of Port Washington zoning ordinance relating to the minimum area requirements for warehouse buildings in the I-2 Industrial Park zoning district. This is the first time we'll hear this. Mr. Harris.
Okay, I don't have a visual for this. This is just a text amendment. And what this is that this is just following up when we had earlier this spring, applying a definition to the use of warehousing. And this is adding a bit more clarity, what was previously kind of an open-ended item in the zoning code about what is warehousing, and this is just following up with applying a minimum square footage to build warehouse use buildings in the I-2 industrial park. And we're setting a base zoning floor of 13,000 square feet. You may ask where the 13,000 square feet is. We just looked at both what is generally considered, based on statistics from the government, is about 16,000 square feet. We looked at what the smallest warehouse building is in the industrial park, and that's just a little over 13,000 square feet. And so, trying to avoid any non-conforming uses, we set a floor of 13,000 square feet for warehouse buildings.
Mr. Harris, I appreciate this being done because early on in the council meetings, there was great discussion of what is a warehouse, what's not a warehouse, what do we want? And I think as we move forward here, especially in the I-2 industrial park zoning areas, we really want to focus on, and I'd ask you to only focus on things that create developmental density and jobs. The idea that we would put up more like pole barn and things where it's just people putting stuff in there and taking that valuable property that could never again be developed for the purposes of developmental density or creating jobs and work in the city of Port Washington. So I applaud you on this and I appreciate it. 13,000 square feet is pretty big, but still at the end of the day, if it's a warehouse, I would hope that it creates or is a hub for either another corporation or company or creates employment opportunities for our citizens and our neighbors.
I might add, based on that, just as a visual reference, a little over 13,000 square feet is the professional services building that was just constructed at the corner of Bywater and Sunset.
Beautiful.
I thought you were going to loop into a commercial there for him.
Yeah.
Those of you without power currently can.
And then the the twin maritime storage buildings that are on Maritimes those are 20,000 square foot buildings each.
Yeah.
So just as a point of reference.
And I think especially on the south side of town where, 40 years ago, they built little storage sheds and storage barns. There was nothing out there at that time that made sense at the time, but now you can see how valuable that property is, if we're trying to draw manufacturing or work. So thank you for this. Any other questions for Bob or comments as that continues to move through in the process? No? Okay.
Thank you for your efforts.
Any staff updates? Oh, so we need a motion on this?
So,
All right.
So moved.
Moved. Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions or concerns on the motion? Sorry, I was in council mode like first reading. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Bob, any staff updates?
I do. I have two staff updates. The first one is, I remember the Plan Commission was interested on the whereabouts of the LED sign ordinance. And so just as a reminder, this commission, I think it was in September, earlier this fall, they forwarded the draft ordinance to council. I think there was no recommendation. It was forwarded to council. And next week, the council will be taking it up at a second reading. And it's very similar to what the Plan Commission saw. We're looking at sign sizes very similar to what we've approved just the two recently, or at least the recent one with St. Matthews. So we're looking at 12 square foot LED boards for business districts B1, B2, and B3, and those that are in public or the residential districts, that is to include for churches and schools. Since working with the city attorney, we couldn't just kind of parcel out business signs versus school and church signs. Those would be just a bit smaller and similar to what we approved at 10 square feet, and to be integrated with a 6-foot monument sign. As I noted, those would be, if approved, it would be only in business districts 1, 2, and 3, not B4, which would keep downtown B4 zoning and LED signs not in downtown. And then I think that is just kind of the larger nuggets, of that zoning ordinance. And then the second item I do have is that if I don't know if all of you are aware, Mayor Knightsky, he has been working with all the city's committees and commissions. I think it's working on, I think the title is, creating a high-functioning committee or commission. And so he has been holding just kind of tutorial sessions with each one. And Plan Commission is coming up on the docket. So I think early next year, we'd be looking at, about an hour long before or after a Plan Commission meeting, just to go over this. It's just this session.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Bob? Forthcoming events. Mr. Knope?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to both acknowledge and thank the fire-breathing frogs of Den 2, Pack 3837, for attending tonight's meeting to see civics in action. And this is all for their Building a Better World adventure requirement, where they are to meet with a government or community leader and learn about their role in the community and discuss with their leaders the important issues facing the community. So it worked out great. Tonight is a den meeting night.
Win-win.
Win-win.
The only problem is there's no popcorn or free wreaths. Gentlemen, we're going to take a couple minutes. Do any of you have any questions about what we do as you're working on your We Below badge towards being a Boy Scout? It's going to be awkward silence till we get a question. Yes, sir.
The two items that were on the agenda for the plat layout approvals, how long does that process take from start to end? This is the end. many months ago did all that start, even just initial discussion?
Yeah, so Mr. Harris can address this because it's anywhere between a few months, excuse me, and a few years.
It actually depends on who is proposing or who is developing the subdivision. Each subdivision is a little different. The ones we saw tonight are fairly straightforward. It is, for the example, the one example was the Whitetails on the north end of town. That was platted to be a subdivision very similar to what you saw up on the screen tonight. I think it was 2005, might have been earlier thereabouts. That went dormant for a while, and they just came back using the similar layout. And usually this was probably, I would say, about a year. If you, from just entering our offices to say, hey, we want to propose a subdivision, and then just working through, the plat approval process. So much of it, though, is the engineering. Subdivisions are really all about engineering. What we see here is just a little sliver or a little slice of it. And this is probably actually only midpoint through the approval process, this preliminary plat. After this preliminary plat, it sets the table for finalizing the engineering for like the streets, the street grades, where the stormwater is going to go, how wide the streets are, and all that stuff that's way beyond me. I'm just a planner and not an engineer. And then once that's finalized, there's a thing called a developer's agreement, and that's essentially just an agreement, what it says, between the developer and the city, and it's a document that gets approved by our common council, and it says who is going to do what and who pays for it, more or less, and that's approved, and that allows construction to go forward. And then oftentimes, usually, once the roads start getting in, there's a thing called a final plat. And that is the final document saying, these are the lots, these are the roads, and it gets recorded, and then they can start selling lots and building homes on those lots. So, if I had to give you a ballpark figure, a year, again, but sometimes there's clinkers and there's wrinkles, and sometimes, or there's just financial issues, and these can get drawn out for a number of years, or sometimes they go away.
To think? Any more questions from you? All right, then if you could approach up here for me, I would appreciate it. If all the scouts could come up here. Please, no? That would be great. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. Who's got the most patches?
I do.
All right. In 3 seconds, I want you to grab that gavel, and when I say this meeting is adjourned, you bang it. I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Newmeyer.
No.
I know, so I'm calling you because it was tied. Okay, by Mr. Knope. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.